Welcome to the MYS Virtual Hangout. Here's your host, MYS Music Director, Raul Gomez.
Good afternoon and welcome to MYS Virtual Hangout number 60. We have done 60 of these since March when we started, and I'm so thankful for having had the chance to speak with so many amazing people, and I'm thankful to all of you for watching the Hangouts and staying connected with the Metropolitan Youth Symphony in this way. My guest today is Dr. Jacqueline Cordova-Arrington. She's an Assistant Professor of Flute at the University of Oregon. Dr. Cordova and I spoke on Tuesday of this week, and I really enjoyed getting to know about her work and her life and the amazing things happening at the University of Oregon. Enjoy. Dr. Cordova-Arrington, welcome to the MYS Virtual Hangout number 60.
Hi, Raul.
It's great to have you. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. It's a little muggy outside, but overall really good. Can't complain.
Cool. And can I call you Jackie?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. So you are currently an assistant professor of flute at the University of Oregon. And how long have you been there? How long have you been teaching there?
Right. So I am going into my second full year as a tenure track faculty member. I was here as an interim faculty member for 1 year. Okay. And then I ended up getting the job for the tenure track. And so, yeah, around going into my second full year. Yeah. And almost third. So it'll be great.
Well, and what a strange year, right? To be doing anything really, but how have you and you know the rest of the faculty adapted to what's happening with all the remote learning?
Right. So it's really interesting for sure. It's been very complex, difficult, exhausting, but at the same time, I'm a really firm believer that I think that there's opportunity everywhere. And so it's so funny you're talking about it, because today actually we had our last flute studio class for the end of the term. And one of the things that we did that was really fun was that we actually engaged with the Eugene Hotel, which is a local senior residence center. So in lieu of juries, which our students usually do at the end of the term, we were not doing juries. And I said, why don't we bring music where it's needed most, to some seniors that are actually being quarantined at this very moment.
Yeah.
And so, I just thought, I still think that even with the way that things are, that there can definitely still be music, even in a virtual format. We are so fortunate to have everything at our fingertips. So today, my students, they all presented mini flute recitals to some of the seniors that are there, and what I did was I put them all into breakout rooms in Zoom, and they shared these mini recitals, and it was so fantastic. So yeah, I mean, it's just that's one of the ways that we're sort of adapting over here. But I work with so many fantastic colleagues at the U of O, and I think that everyone has really just taken something that's a pretty difficult situation and is kind of running with it in really creative ways. So we're not just like surviving. I really think that we're like thriving in this climate.
That is so wonderful. And well, you're bringing this music to these senior citizens also at a time that many of them are isolated during Thanksgiving and the holidays. So it's, I think, especially significant to them. And it also, I think one of the things that we all miss the most from in-person performances is the ability to connect with people, right? And you're given that opportunity to your students by doing these performances. And instead of juries, I think that's really, really a wonderful way to utilize this talent and this energy.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was wildly successful. And I think that even when, hopefully when I go back to in-person teaching, that, I'll be able to take some of that with me, because there are lots of people that are sort of homebound and don't have access to music. And I think that really, considering those people, for whom that circumstance might be an everyday thing, is really, really important to the art that we make.
Yeah, very cool. And that brings me to something. I printed your bio. I have it right here. And there's something in it that I want to ask you about. But first, I'm going to turn off this really loud heater that I have next to me that I forgot to turn off.
I just turned mine off before we started, so I'm with you.
Yeah, well, you remember. I didn't, but now it's off. So your bio says this, which I think is so cool. It says that you are committed to collaborating with distinguished artists, citizens, and thinkers to create inspiring and culturally unifying experiences for communities and artists alike. So I want to ask you about the culturally unifying experiences, and what do you mean by that exactly?
Right. My gosh, so incredible. I actually have never had anyone ask me about this very thing. And what I wanted to say was that for me, so I was a member of a chamber music collective called Ensemble Connect.
Yes.
And the way this statement came to be was actually we were given this task of developing personal vision mission statements. And so this is my artistic mission statement. And what I mean by culturally unifying is that I really think that when people attend concerts, that something that's so great about music is that we all sort of like have this visceral, physical experience with the music,
Right.
For me, playing in orchestra and feeling that sound wash over me, and then describing that feeling to audiences and having them sort of understand the way that I experience music is a way of culturally unifying on one level. So for me, community engagement, bringing people into an experience that artists have is like the first way I kind of think about unifying. And then the other thing that I think is really has always been really important to me is this idea of representation. That when people hear music in a concert, it's something that they that resonates with them personally, with their experiences. So I guess one instance of that, of cultural unification, was I, as a member of Ensemble Connect, I used to give concerts in sort of unconventional spaces. And so one of those spaces was a prison. And so I went to Queensboro Maximum Correctional Facility. That was in New York, where I was living. And so,
this, Jack, if I may, this is a Carnegie Hall program,
yes.
right? Okay.
Yes. So essentially, Ensemble Connect is a program of Carnegie Hall. It's for young artists and emerging musicians. And what it does is it couples high-level performance through the While concert hall series, and that partners that with outstanding educational programs and engagement programs. And so, I spent 2 years working in New York as a member of this ensemble, and it was absolutely life-changing for me. But in any event, I was at this Queensboro Correctional Facility playing with a quintet of mine in the group. And we were playing all different pieces, from West Side Story. And it was so interesting because, when we did some research on West Side Story, and the different places and parts of New York that were sort of inspired places.
Yeah.
In West Side Story, the inmates that were there could really resonate. The story resonated with them because it was placed locationally, somewhere where they used to call home.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing that was really interesting, and a colleague of mine in the same ensemble told me this, that she did another prison concert, and one of the most moving things that she had ever heard from an inmate was that she had led this activity where she had asked the audience to close their eyes and to sort of think about a time when blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening was the inmate came up to her afterwards, and he said, it's not so often that I get to close my eyes and imagine. Because imagine you're in a prison system and you're always watching your back, and for someone to give you this opportunity to experience art is a way that we are connecting ourselves with people culturally that we might not necessarily, so that's like another thing. And for me, many of the inmates that were at the particular facility where I was, they were Black and Latino and could really identify with seeing a person of color like me, on stage playing. So that is another aspect. So there's so many levels that sort of like trickles, but those are just a few of the reasons why I kind of embed that into my mission, because I realize how important it is.
Yeah, yeah. It's so easy for us, who play music professionally or conduct or to sort of forget about that very powerful experience you can create for people that your colleague experienced at this correctional facility, and that also you experience, like, when we play in a large concert hall full of people, and I'm sure the vast majority of whom really appreciate the music, but I don't know, I feel like we sometimes lose track of that very direct line that you and the very powerful impact that you can have on an individual at that level, and
Right.
that's what that experience kind of makes me think about. Now, kind of related to this, and about the culturally unifying aspect of your work, is that when you went to Eastman for your DMA, you got a certificate in world music.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think it's just, for me, I have always been interested in like creating one big world community. It sounds very, very cheesy, but also really honoring and celebrating like the traditions of other cultures, like getting an insight to that. I think my work with that really started when I was a student at the University of Michigan, and I played in an Arabic ensemble called Shahnaz, and I played the Arabic
Cool.
flute, the ney. And so that was really fun. It sort of got me started. I also, while at Michigan, played some Hindustani flute. We had a resident teacher that was there from India in Ann Arbor. And, I think for me, when I got to my doctoral study, I thought to myself, if there was something else apart from flute that I could teach, apart from teaching applied flute, what would that be? And I realized that it was so important for me to sort of continue this study with world musics, because inevitably those things really, I found, like, influenced how I approach my instrument. So like when I'm playing like a Baroque sonata, I'm playing a Bach sonata, I'm thinking about the woodenness of the flute. Not just from a Baroque flute, but maybe from like a Hindustani flute, like the hollow sort of sound that creates, the hollow sort of sound that shakuhachi flute creates. I think that there's so many different ways that, musics from other cultures can, like, impact, classical music in a really positive
Yeah.
way, and so that's one of the reasons why I pursued it, because I wanted it to inform, like, the way I expressed myself artistically and the way I thought about sound specifically. And I also wanted to share that with students, that you don't just have to be focused on Western classical music, that they're obviously, to me as a teacher, training fundamentals and things like that are increasingly important, and essential. But I also think that there's also this other back door into classical music through other perspectives, and that can be really rich.
Yeah, that is so
Yeah.
cool. Was this something through Eastman directly, or with the University of Rochester? I guess I'm curious about the. Like,
Yeah, sure. So this was actually through the Eastman School of Music.
huh.
And, most doctoral programs will have like a cognate, but I wanted to do like a certificate, which is like a step up from
Huh.
a cognate. And so at the Eastman School of Music, Ellen Koskoff is sort of like this leading scholar in ethnomusicology. And I thought to myself, how could I not take advantage of working with her?
Yeah.
And it was so fun. My focus at the time was collective memory in music of the African and Latin diaspora. So I wanted to look at the way that cultures remember themselves in music, and everything like that is inspired by a song. actually, my interest in that area was inspired by a song that my husband is from New York but lived in Puerto Rico for a very long time, about the Puerto Rican flag.
Okay.
And sort of this whole song, in the language of it, it's Puerto Rican people very much identify with this flag, and it's a very, very big deal, especially when you look at the history. And so the fact that people were remembering themselves, choosing to remember that dedication to the flag and that love of the flag in music was something I saw as a trend. And so that's what I mainly focused on when I was at Eastman.
That's so cool. I think that's so wonderful. And then was it so? You spent some time in Germany with a Fulbright grant. When was that in this timeline of your DMA and all of that?
I know. There's a lot going on, isn't there? No, I know. So that was right after actually my master's degree at Cincinnati Conservatory of Music.
Okay.
And it was really interesting because I got to the beginning of the second year of my master's, and I said, I do not know what I'm going to do after school, because I realized that, gosh, I have to get a job. Like, I know that I had gotten better, but I didn't feel like I was quite ready to launch into the whole orchestral field.
Sure.
And I also still had a lot of questions about, like, what role community engagement was going to have for myself, because unfortunately, in many professional settings, I had seen sort of musicians begrudgingly do what they call, like, one-out concerts, which
Right.
are engagement concerts.
Sure,
and
sure.
the musicians weren't so excited about that. So I wanted to figure out, how could I marry this love of working with the community with a very high level of playing? And I noticed that Berlin was doing it the best the Berlin Philharmonic. Was doing it the best of any orchestra that I had ever seen. And so I went there to go study that, and I loved every ounce of it.
Yeah, but hold on, that doesn't just happen like suddenly you go to Berlin and you start doing it, okay? So how did you go from thinking about that to getting a Fulbright grant and then actually going there? How does that even work?
Sure. So let me preface this a little bit. So I had applied for a Fulbright actually in my undergraduate degree to go study at the Paris Conservatory, and I didn't get it. And I was, I'm the kind of person, when I don't succeed at something, I'm going to find out why and figure out what to do the next time. And so I did, and I started talking to some of my mentors. Nadine Asen is one of them. She was a mentor of mine at the Aspen Music Festival when I was a student going there.
Sure.
And I told her that I had this idea. And she said, oh, well, you've played for Emmanuel Paoud, who's one of the principal flutists of that orchestra. Why don't you, send him an email and see if he'd be interested in working with you? And so I said, what? I was like, I don't even have his personal email. So I went to his, artist website, and I sent in a cold email to him to start. And I said, I played for you. I don't know if you remember me. I'd love to study with you. I'm looking at doing this Fulbright. Is there any way that you could help me with the process? And he said, well, I would love I would love for you to study with me very regularly, but my season is pretty busy next year. But certainly if you come to Berlin, you can study with me. But if you're looking for a main teacher, I'd love to connect you with Andreas Blau, who's the other principal flutist of the orchestra. So he sent an email on my behalf to Andreas Blau, who's the other principal flutist. And he said, this student is trying to get over to Germany. Can we help her out? And they did. And the next day, Mr. Blau sent a letter from Italy saying that he would endorse my playing. He had heard great things about me from Emmanuel Paoud, and thought if I could go through all the steps of Fulbright and pass, certainly he'd be happy to teach me. So
let's just pause for a moment here to acknowledge the fact that, he even got back to you from, this cold email that you sent, and then all of these things happened, and you ended up being the only or the first American to go there and be in that, full-time studying with these amazing musicians. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, it was really great. It was amazing. It was really, really fun to do it. And I'm just so thankful for the experience. They're both really, really different. I studied primarily with Andreas Blau and then saw Emmanuel like whenever he was in town and really, really helpful. I think Andreas Blau was sort of this, he recently retired from the Berlin Philharmonic and had something like a 40-year career there. I mean, he got into the orchestra when he was 21.
Yeah.
I
mean, what a place to be. I mean, that's very cool.
Berlin's amazing.
And of course, you gained, without a doubt, musically, right? But then tell me about the community engagement part of things and what you experienced there and what you learned that you're applying now to things that you do.
Right. So in Berlin, what's really interesting was actually that I think a lot of people sort of had the impression that when you go to Europe that everything is sort of sponsored by the government, and that's actually not 100% true. The reason why the community engagement programs are so successful is actually for two reasons. One, when Simon Rattle was the artistic director there, he met with a private bank, Deutsche Bank, and said, hey, our community engagement program needs an endowment, and we're the Berlin Philharmonic, and we have to present the best product in this particular area, so would you endow this program? And there are very few programs in the country where their education departments are endowed.
Wow, okay.
But to Simon Rattle, it was just that important. And he knew that he could use his platform to advocate for educational programs, in that capacity. And so that's helped tremendously. And the reason why that's helpful is that all the members of the Berlin Philharmonic are such amazing players, and they have careers, in orchestras, soloists, as chamber musicians. And so what they developed was this rotational system. So they have an orchestra A, B, C, and D. And so they're able to rotate players in and out so that players, if they want to design an educational program or a project, they can do that without feeling the stress that they might not be able to practice, or something like that, or it might take away from what they have to do.
Yeah.
So I think that endowment gave a great deal of flexibility to the way that the infrastructure of the organization works. And I think the other thing that was really remarkable that I saw was that you would have a violinist all the way in the back of the second violins who had this opportunity finally, after so many years, to be a leader and to create a project. And so their musicians have complete autonomy and direction over projects. So musicians will present a proposal, and then they'll get a couple concerts off, and they'll have a chance to sort of craft that. And it's really outstanding what they do there. But I think it's largely in part to this private endowment.
Yeah.
So.
But it sounds like the musicians themselves are invested and engaged and right in doing these things.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll be really honest with you. I mean, anybody can be invested, right? But if you're pulled in multiple directions and you don't have a structure that can be supportive of you doing many things, you might grow to not like doing certain things.
Sure.
And that's, I think, can very often be the case here in the United States. It's not so much that players don't like to do engagement concerts, is that they feel very pulled in many directions. Right. I need to make this great product, and this requires that much time. I also have family. I also have my other career, as a teacher or soloist. So the orchestra really looked at how can we make this structure work so that the musicians feel inspired and encouraged to create.
Yeah, exactly. So they created an infrastructure that allows for musicians to do that in a way that's artistically fulfilling. Because, like you're saying, I mean, and I also have had the incredible luck of guest conducting concerts with professional orchestras for this type of cultural engagement and outreach. And the truth is that the vast majority of the time you have one rehearsal, right, for the whole program that often includes difficult music. I mean, like for example, if it's like film music, like some of that music is really hard. So you have one rehearsal in the middle of maybe a couple of big concerts with big repertoire, and the musician's experience is certainly not as good as it could be with a program like you're describing. So I think, do you find now, however long it's been, that American orchestras are starting to create those conditions?
Yeah, I think one orchestra that's really doing it well is the LA Phil. I mean, like the LA Phil is really is doing a lot of really fantastic work. There are a lot of orchestras doing fantastic work, even in Portland, okay? If you guys haven't heard about the Lullaby Project, you have to check it out,
Oregon Symphony.
Yeah, with the Oregon Symphony. So there are a lot of orchestras that are really trying to take the torch, to figure out ways to not only offer like really exciting engagement opportunities, but are also, not sort of putting musicians in the position of feeling like, well, it's either you're really invested in giving to the community or you're like just 100% invested in, presenting the best musical product that you can. I definitely think that things are shifting, in a really, really good way.
Yeah. And you know what? Going back to the pandemic, it's a gigantic disruption in all models of presenting music, So I'm hopeful that some of the things that orchestras are having to do right now in order to, present music, that we will carry that over to when we go back in person, and find these different, like, out-of-the-box creative ways of, like, just like what the Berlin Philharmonic was doing, like send smaller chamber ensembles and give musicians more ownership and create the right conditions to present this type of work, which is so crucially important, especially if we're trying to, open our doors to more people, right? And to increase and diversify our audiences. So, cool. Well, I think it's so cool that you got to spend time in Berlin and work with those amazing people and learn all these amazing things. There's a video of you playing a piece of music that I'm excited to share with our viewers. So I wanted to ask if you would be willing to introduce this piece, and then we'll listen to it.
Absolutely. Okay, so the piece that I'm playing, it's called Tuhuayo, and it's by Daniel Cueto. And this piece is about this Tuhuayo, which is like a Peruvian bird that lives in this jungle. And this bird only comes out at night to sing, or it will only kind of come off of a branch if it's to like go and swoop and kill its prey. It's not like sort of the bird that you typically think about, like, with Peter and the Wolf, like a little flighty bird. Like it's like a 12-inch long bird. It's like quite big. And, and I kind of love pieces that sort of counter this sort of birdie image, like, or a very cute birdie image that flutists always are sort of associated with. And so I love this opportunity to sort of like play what I hear as sort of like night music. Yeah. Because I think that, that the flute can do that so wonderfully. I mean, like Firebird, Rossignol, yes. And things like that. So I love that. And, this composer, I actually had not heard of him before, but he's actually a wonderful flutist. And I fell upon one of his works on YouTube, just sort of like browsing, and I was really, really excited about it. And so, yeah, that's why I kind of chose to work on the piece.
Is he Peruvian?
Yes.
Is he based in Peru?
No, I think he's based in California. I'm not sure.
Cool.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So here is Tuhuayo by Daniel Cueto, performed by Dr. Jackie Cordova-Arrington. Enjoy. That was so very cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for letting me like give that piece of platform, you know?
And you just recorded it. This video is like you, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Just a
just
couple days
recorded
ago?
in my office,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah.
Very cool. There's something I want to share with you now. I watched an interview that you did, I think maybe right before the pandemic started. It's on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the description of this video. In it, you mention a composer Allison Loggins Hall. And what I want to share with you, and I'm going to play for you about a minute of it, is that our flute ensemble, directed by Adam Eccleston, just recorded a piece by her called Stacked.
Amazing! Yeah,
And we
I know
presented
piece
that.
very well.
Yeah, cool. So we presented that as part of our fall virtual concert, which happened last week, November 21st. So I just want to share with like a minute of it. Okay,
Yeah.
and then since you mentioned Allison, then maybe we can talk a little bit more about new music and how important it is to you. So here it is. Alright, so I'll stop it there. I was so excited, first of all, that Adam chose this piece. And I'm a huge fan of Adam's work and so grateful for his work with our students at MYS. And so you mentioned Allison in this interview, and I guess I want to ask you why are you attracted to her music specifically, and how important is new music to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So first, I think what attracted me to the piece was the sense of groove, right?
Yeah.
Like, even when you and I were listening to it, we're like moving our heads and like we're enjoying the groove of the piece. And that is something that I think by and large people universally get when they hear this piece, and especially when they hear Allison's music. Allison is an absolutely incredible composer, and recently she was commissioned to write a piece actually for the National Flute Association that was sort of a response to, the tragic death of George Floyd, among many others. And she's just someone that is so just incredibly creative, but just also has this way of bringing people in to music that might not necessarily like come in to the concert.
Yeah.
And so she does that with her music, while also appealing to, musicians that have been playing music for a really long time. I mean, how many musicians, well, actually, I would say I have a couple colleagues that would say that one of the things that draws the most to music is groove. But I mean, how many classical musicians will really pinpoint groove as an entry point to their experience,
Sure.
So that's one of the reasons why I was really drawn, that I've been drawn to her as a composer, and especially to that piece. And I guess for me, new music is incredibly important. It's such a sort of blanket term, new music, because it
Sure.
encompasses so much, And, to be really frank, I used to think when I was a student that new music only sounded one way. And it totally doesn't, I mean, there's so much that's available. And I think that new music really can give voice to composers that don't necessarily always have voice, or give voice, actually not even to the composers, but to new perspectives and experiences that are really relevant to the people listening. And so I think new music just isn't important, it's essential.
Yes.
Because I think if we don't continue to have music, I think we sort of stifle the perspectives that we're allowing to surface in the music that we're listening to and playing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
new music is a huge part of what I do.
It's really important to us at MYS too. And one of my favorite things that we do is we have a partnership with a Portland-based new music ensemble, I think you could call it, Fear No Music, and their Young Composers Project. And what we do, this partnership is called The Authentic Voice, and we commission and perform works for full orchestra by young local composers.
Wow.
And what's really exciting to me, Jackie, is to just to see our students' reaction and relationship with those pieces. And you know, sometimes we get the young composers to conduct the piece as well, you know, if they're comfortable doing that. And then, you know, I'm able to just kind of step back, and it's just pure, you know, young local talent on stage, and young musicians just really owning the music of a peer, right, that's on stage with them or not. So I do think that, you know, we as educators, you know, we need to create a generation of young musicians that will grow up with this idea that like you're saying, new music is essential. And I just love, you know, even for students like at colleges, conservatories, to go ahead and commission things from their, you know, people like composition students at their schools, or like just it's so rich.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the great thing about, University of Oregon School of Music is a phenomenal school, but it's not like a conservatory. So, you know, I have students that are pursuing all different kinds of career paths. Most of my students are very like squarely focused on like, you know, music performance or music education route. But I have actually a master's student who's a composer, and she's in her PhD study, and you know, and studying with me while, you know, doing her PhD in composition. And she has written, her name is Sarah Jordan, and she's written a piece for our studio's flute choir in the past and conducted it. And I just, you know, I love having Sarah as a member of our studio, because I think as a composer, she really brings in this really interesting perspective, especially when she's commenting in studio class, like, you know, with regards to sound and structure. And yeah, so it's just incredible, and I feel so fortunate to have access to so many great composers here in Oregon.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a wonderful place. I've lived in different places in the U.S., and I'm from Costa Rica originally, and I've been in Oregon. This is my 5th year, and I've really come to appreciate the scene, and you know, it's a really exciting place to be in. Okay, so I do want to talk more about the University of Oregon and your programs and your auditions coming up. But before, we have just a couple of fun segments that we do on the MYS Virtual Hangouts. And the first one of them is our game that we play called Two Truths and a Lie. And you sent 3 statements that I'm going to put up on the screen here. And one of them is a lie, and 2 of them are true. And I have to guess. And if I guess right, I win. And if I fail to find the lie, then you win. Bragging rights. That's all we offer, unfortunately. So, and you and I just met. This is our first time talking. So a little. It's gonna be mostly just educated guesses, I suppose.
Yeah.
But here are the statements. I'm gonna read them out loud, and maybe I'll try to read your face as I read them. So here we go. Statement A is that you, Jackie, are a big football fan and your favorite team are the Philadelphia Eagles. Statement B, you're working on your poker face. Statement B is that your favorite fruit is a tomato, which is indeed a fruit. And statement C is that you have a uniquely terrible sense of direction. So, okay, I know from reading about you that you are from Philly.
That was low-hanging fruit. That was the low-hanging fruit one.
So I mean, but maybe maybe you're not into football, or maybe you're just trying to throw me off here. And speaking of fruit, your second statement is about fruit. Tomato. I like tomatoes. I know people who are like, I don't know if allergic, but at least tomato didn't get along with it. I also know several extraordinary musicians who have a terrible sense of direction. So what I do is I'm gonna try to guess one of the truths first. Okay. And I lived in New Orleans for 5 years, and before that I went to LSU. So I became also a big football fan. And I never got that much into college football, but I absolutely love the New Orleans Saints. So, you're from Philly, and I guess I'm going to go ahead and say that statement A, that you're a big football fan, is true.
That is correct.
It is. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
They're not doing so hot this season, though.
I was not going to bring it up.
Yeah,
I wasn't
good.
going to. But, I think that as a Saints fan, we're okay. We're mostly okay with the Eagles. There are some teams that we just don't like at all.
Yeah, I know. That is
but the Eagles, I think the Eagles are cool. And not having the best season this year. The Saints are having a pretty good season.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a true statement. So we're down to 2. And I'm going to go ahead and say that your lie is the tomato one.
Correct.
That is your lie. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we talk about that, let's talk about your sense of direction. So not good?
Oh my gosh, horrible. So if you're in a car with me and I say go right, go left. It's pretty bad. Which made, my husband and I, when we moved over here, our trip cross country pretty fun.
Yeah.
But fortunately there was a lot of straight, driving, not too many turns. So, yeah, I don't know where I got that from. My sense of direction is not really good.
That's, but luckily now we have GPS, right? And you just do whatever your phone tells you to do if you're driving.
I know.
Were you in New York before you moved here?
New York.
So how, just going off topic here, but when my wife and I moved to Portland, we drove from New Orleans to Atlanta. That's where her family lives. And then we drove all the way to Portland. And we took about 10 days. And it was such a wonderful experience to do that road trip and get to see just, the country and to really get to truly become aware of how vast it is. So had you done a cross-country road trip before?
No, not like that.
So
no.
how was it?
I don't think I had the same experience as you because I had a dog and a cat in the car. And cats are not, well, at least our cat is not like a huge fan of the ride. But I will say we definitely saw some really beautiful things. So I'll say that for sure. But, I think my husband and I, we were just like so exhausted by the end. We're like, are we there?
Did you just try to do it as quickly as possible?
Well, no, we had to stop obviously with our pets. And my husband was a real trooper. He actually drove the entire way.
Well, he didn't want to get lost if you're driving.
I know he was a little concerned. So he said, just hang out, just hang out. And I was in charge of making sure the music was good the whole time.
Very good.
And I did a great job with that. So
DJ Jackie.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, traveling with a cat is not. I've never had that experience. I've had cats before though, and I know they wouldn't like that.
Yeah. But there were definitely really beautiful parts.
Yeah. Cool. So and then finally, tomato. Is that just kind of random? Do you hate tomato or?
No, well, actually, it's so funny. I used to hate tomatoes as a kid, and then they kind of have grown on me. But my family, actually, everyone in my family, they have this love of tomatoes. So my dad when he used to grow tomatoes, would like just pick up the tomatoes and eat them kind of with a little salt.
Sure.
And I've never had like an affinity for them like that. And so my favorite fruit is actually pineapple, piña. And it's like, I love pineapple. So when I just had my daughter, she's 8 months old now.
Oh, sweet.
And when I was pregnant, people say that like when you're pregnant, you crave like the opposite.
Yeah.
And you don't crave the things that you usually like. But pineapple was something that I craved. I think I had like a pineapple a day or something, because I just love for sure a pineapple a day.
Oh,
So
man.
yeah, but I love pineapple, and no diss to tomato. It's just not my favorite.
Sure. What's your daughter's name?
Naomi.
Naomi.
Or Naomi.
Naomi. That's a beautiful name.
Yeah, Naomi Ophelia.
Naomi Ophelia. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. We have a 21-month-old girl.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, her name is Alma, and my wife's fruit of choice was cantaloupe.
Oh, cantaloupe is really good.
So
It's really,
that
really
was
good.
her craving.
Yeah. No, cantaloupe is a good one.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
oh,
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So, hey, then I win this round of 2 truths and a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. Good job.
Thank you. Okay, and now we have another segment as we are getting close to the end of our time together, called Sound Advice.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you, Jackie, is if you could go back in time and find yourself when you were, a high school student, maybe, practicing your flute or doing whatever, what advice would you have for yourself back then? And this can be music or life advice or anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. I think, and this is going to be really, really simple, but I would say to my teenage self, do you. And what that means is that, like, don't look at other people and what they're doing. Like, fully embrace who you are. 'Cause, right, like, when you're a teenager, sometimes it can feel like, I don't know, that like you might be a fish out of water. Like you're like, like you're just, especially, I don't know, when I was a teenager, like I was, buying thrift store clothing and like cutting up and sewing together and like making my own outfits, and I didn't quite fit in, necessarily to like, with everyone that was around me. But I did love music, and I worked really hard. And I think that what I've learned is that, being a teenager doesn't last forever. And that even if you don't necessarily fit in like the social environment that you're in, like you will find your own social environment later. And and that you should really just do you and embrace you and everything that's interesting to you. So like I loved being an orchestra nerd, and I embraced that at 100%. And I just think that so often right now, like especially with like social media and Instagram and Facebook, it's so easy to like scroll and sort of just do a quick, even if it's like a subconscious comparison between yourself and where someone else is, but in realizing that like your circumstances are going to change, everybody's circumstances change, you really can't compare yourself too much to anybody else. So do you, and kind of walk on your own path, rather than looking at other people.
Very cool. Well, I mean, it sounds like you were doing you, so you would probably just give yourself further encouragement to continue doing that. And
Right.
I think that's wonderful advice. So thank you for sharing that. And now the last segment of the Hangout is what we call the plug. So you get to plug anything you want to plug. And I actually want to suggest if you would tell us about the University of Oregon's upcoming undergrad auditions, and also if there are any current undergrad students somewhere else who want to go there for grad school, how that all works. And before you answer, I do want to say that we at MYS are very thankful to your colleagues at the University of Oregon, because our top orchestra in the before pandemic, we used to do a retreat every year. And our guest artists were all members of the faculty at the University of Oregon, like David Jacobs and Melissa Peña and Steve Polo. So we are very much aware of how awesome your, this program is. But can we please learn about upcoming auditions and anything that we should know?
Yeah, sure. So the deadline for graduate auditions is actually December 1st, which is today. But I would say that certainly if you're really interested in the program, but you aren't able to get your application in and you're a graduate student, we have some very competitive scholarships and an absolutely fantastic program. A lot of our graduate students, as well as our undergrads, go on to do really incredible things, playing in orchestras, winning auditions. And our undergraduate deadline is January 15th. So there's still a bit more time to apply for that. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about what it's like to be a member of our flute studio, you can always be in touch with me. I oftentimes will invite students to join us for our studio classes, which will now be on Zoom.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so if there are any students that are interested and you kind of want to get a sneak peek as to what's going on, you can just be in touch with me. And we'll be sure maybe leave my email address.
Sure. Is that listed on your faculty page on the UFO website? Okay.
Yeah, it's just jcordov7@uoregon.edu. And you can feel free to be in touch with me if you have any questions about the program. I think what I like so much about our programs is that I really like to couple, kind of intensive work on fundamentals, because I think that if your fundamentals are amazing, you can do anything. So that I couple that really with an approach that really takes into consideration sort of what the students are interested in doing. So with my students, I work on this whole mission vision unit where the students actually craft their own mission vision statements. So in that way, I think that our curriculum is really flexible, trying to meet the students where they want to be, because right now we're living in an age where really a lot of people are making their own niche and sort of figuring out, what they're going to do, because you can no longer sort of just, fit into one role anymore. And so I really work with students to do that, and would encourage you to be in touch with students if you're really interested in learning a little bit more about what I do.
Awesome.
And how I teach.
We'll make sure to link your faculty page on the description of the of this video, so that folks can go directly and find your email address right there. Jackie, thank you so much for chatting with me. I've truly enjoyed our time together, and congrats on all your achievements, and I really hope that we'll see a bunch of MYS students in your studio in the years to come. Okay?
Yeah, well, certainly. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. We are going to take a little break with the Hangouts, and we will be back in January. So stay tuned for more amazing guests. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will also be getting some really fun performances from our ensembles that we have been recording over the last few weeks. And also don't miss our Holiday Spectacular concert on December 23rd at 7 p.m. I will see you then. Take care.